Hello, I'm Alex Dyer, County Ordinary for the Episcopal Church in Colorado, here with one of my predecessors and who is now the Disaster Response Director for the Episcopal Church in Colorado, the Reverend Canon Carl Andrews, who many of you who will be watching this video should know by now. If you don't, where have you been? Because Carl has been a tremendous help. And I would just like to say publicly that this man is not getting paid for this work. He is doing this out of the goodness of his heart. There are probably at least one extra star in his crown, if not more, for all the wonderful work that he is doing. I think when he signed on for this, he had no idea that there was going to be a pandemic. So thank you, Canon Carl, for all the wonderful work you are doing on behalf of the church, and especially the Episcopal Church here in Colorado.
Thank you for those kind words, Canon Alex. I'm very grateful to be able to continue to serve in God's kingdom, and I believe we all should continue to serve until we no longer have that opportunity.
So today, Carl, we're going to talk about Ash Wednesday. Last Ash Wednesday, I remember preaching at St. Luke's here in Denver, and the pandemic was kind of on the horizon, but wasn't here yet. So this is really kind of our first Ash Wednesday, where we're kind of in the midst of this pandemic, and many of us thought that we would not experience yet another Lent here in this pandemic, but yet here we are. So I wanted to talk about some real practical ways that you were recommending where we can stay safe, right, and still hold the integrity of the Ash Wednesday service. So if you were a parish priest out there serving in a parish here in Colorado, and Ash Wednesday rolls around, what would you do?
I would look for an opportunity to do Ash Wednesday outside in a drive-up situation, being masked and gloved, and the ashes having been blessed as in the prayer book on page 265, and they being handed out, and people pick up their own off a table in small plastic bags so that they could impose the ashes on their own forehead with the words that we all are familiar with. Remember, you are dust, and to dust you shall return.
So self-imposition of ashes, probably put them in little like glycine envelopes or some other kind of envelope or whatever, to hopefully to reduce the plastic. People drive through in a basket, maybe in little bags or something like that too, where there's a prayer. Some people are doing some great stuff with, prayer cards and other kind of stuff too, and inviting people to a Holy Lent. So people drive up. So what if you were, a little bit different? You said, you know what? As a priest, I just got to impose ashes, even though, the prayer book doesn't require that. But you just, for your own reason, you just said, I have to do it, or you were in a congregation that had to have a priest do it for some odd reason. Is there a safe way to do that?
I think there is. I think you can pre-mix your ash with a little bit of oil. Mm-hmm. And make a semi-paste. Still now, I would do it outside. I would be wearing gloves and a mask, and I would take a biodegradable Q-tip and I would dip it in the ash, and then I would extend it to that person's forehead and make the sign of the cross. They don't have to get out of their car. I don't have to go any further. And we all can be safe in that capacity. In both cases of what we mentioned earlier and what we're talking about right now, the formation office within the Diocese of Colorado has already created some prayer cards and the like on terms of how to have a Holy Lent, and those are readily available on the website.
Great. So type of mask, does it matter? Some people are saying double mask. Should we try to shoot for an N95 mask?
I would encourage, particularly at this time where we're now seeing variants of COVID-19, at minimum, you use a 95 and a secondary over the top of it. This will be able to ensure that you are that much more safe. The variants are going to be a problem until we get everybody thoroughly vaccinated and get people at least with their first shot, and then they'll have a chance on the variants, which is highly contagious and more contagious than COVID-19.
But what if clergy are vaccinated? Do they still need to wear a mask, or what's the...
We need to continue to wear masks and practice social distancing through the summer, at minimum, regardless of whether we have been immunized or not. This is the way that we can love our neighbor by keeping them safe, because nobody knows yet whether a person who's been vaccinated is a carrier or not. They're still working on that test.
So what you're saying is nothing really changes for the foreseeable future.
Nope.
Okay, well, it'll be an interesting Lent, to say the least. I think some of us have some practice in this, at least as Holy Week is coming up, and perhaps may do things a little bit differently. But it can still be a Holy Lent, even though it's going to look and feel very different. Lent will still be Lent. And, one priest reminded me, too, that, to think about the powerful symbolism of somebody self-imposing ashes, perhaps in a mirror. Just the kind of, that act in itself is different and yet could be very holy, having to look yourself in the mirror when you do that, type of thing. So some new things could come of this as well.
I would take a variant on that just for a little bit, and that is, if you had X person making sure that everybody was able to pick up their ashes, and you had a particular 1 or 2 Ash Wednesday services that you were doing on the screen, you could then join together as a community of faith, and you could turn around and at that particular point in the service impose the ashes on yourself while you're looking at other people.
Yep.
And that, I think, would be a very holy moment.
Or even in the family, I mean, kids can impose ashes on parents and get them involved, or vice versa type of thing too, and spouses and whatnot too. I just think the intimacy in that act, that holy act, could be pretty profound.
I think all priests and deacons and laity who have imposed ashes on others before are very cognitive of that particular moment when you say, remember thou art dust, and to dust thou shalt return, and it's a child.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it really sort of brings things home in the inner part of your soul. Now, going back to what you just said and having the child imposing it on the parent, that might put the whole thing in a new ball game that would be very, very holy and healthy.
Yeah, I think, if we weren't in touch with our mortality before this pandemic, I think a lot of us are a little bit more in touch with it now, and Ash Wednesday will have a different feel maybe than past years. And maybe that's not a bad thing.
I think that's a good thing. I've heard a couple of humorous methods for imposing ashes. I'm not convinced that they are probably the easiest and the most sensible ways of doing it. That runs the gamut from using marshmallows at the end of a stick, or a Q-tip, or not a Q-tip, but a pool cue. And one person who went as far as to say, well, let's just cancel. No, this is an opportunity for us to be able to really have a beginning of a holy Lent, and as we move forward to the resurrection at Easter.
Well, thank you, Canon Carl, again, for all the wonderful work doing here in our diocese, for keeping us safe, for having to be, quote unquote, the bad guy and deliver bad news and tell people stuff they don't want to hear. But we know it's all because we want to keep each other safe. And I know you have been a huge resource to me, as well as to our bishop and the entire office of the bishop's staff, and also including all the wonderful priests and clergy and wardens and people that are out there. So thank you. So.
You're very kind. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. Wishing everybody a healthy and happy and holy Lent, as well as we venture into this new Lent.
For our Ash Wednesday services here at St. Alban's in Windsor, we're going to be passing out glassine envelopes filled with ashes that people may take and self-impose during the service. So I have this envelope. I have our ashes from last year. We'll dump them in there enough that people can just poke their finger in there, put a basket like this, and it'll all be ready for them to go on the day of the service. Thank you.